So I'm going to read the information that Annalisa has put for herself, which is she's a professor at the Faculty of Education and Culture and serves as a director of the doctoral program Education and Society, leads a research group called RESET, which is research engagement for sustainable and equitable transformations. And I had the pleasure of hearing Annalisa speak at our chat reading group, and that was back in October when she talked about Transformative Agency. So we're very fortunate to have her with us today, and I'll hand it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I enjoyed already quite a lot the interactions with some colleagues and also with some students participating. For me, this is the first time I participate in this summer school, so I'm very excited about it. I'm sorry I was not able to participate as much as I would have liked, all the amazing sessions that I saw in the program, but these are at the beginning of the calendar year is my intensive teaching period in my university. I try to cluster my teaching duties all together at the beginning of the calendar year to free my space for research later on. So this means that, you know, at 9:30 local time here, just half an hour after we finish, I will have to continue with my own teaching. So I'm sorry for not be able to be as much involved as I would have liked. But I can see that you are recording, so if it would be at all possible to access some of the recordings of the sessions, I would be most grateful. This is my email address. You can always contact me. I cannot guarantee an immediate response, but you can trust I will respond. And for more information about the RESET, my research group, you can check this webpage here. I can also share these slides if you are interested. Then what I'm going to talk about is TADS. TADS is an acronym for Transformative Agency by Double Stimulation, which is a framework I've been developing for some time, more exactly 12 years. I've been focusing specifically on that. So I will be introducing this TADS model that is emerging and that has been also experimented, tested on in several empirical cases. I will show some examples of these cases, and I will also include a little exercise in breakout rooms for us to test these ideas in practice. And then I hope there will be also time for a discussion at the end. My understanding is that we have 2 hours. Please tell me if I have misunderstood something. So we will not have any glitch, and I will not take the time for others after me. I can then move on now. What I will be talking about, one of my focal questions is how can educational research help educators and learners to act agentively to transform themselves and their circumstances? This is one of the overarching questions that guide my work and the research group work of RESET. There are a number of problems when such a question is asked. The fact is that the most influential conceptualizations of agency from psychology and sociology have been adapted in the field of education in a rather mechanical way, without fully exploring where they come from, these conceptualizations, and especially what kind of contributions they can offer to educators and learners in the specific field that we work in, the field of education, for most of us. It is very, very crucial that these conceptualizations actually inform practice. And the problem is that many of these mainstream conceptualizations of agency leave a lot to desire in these terms. So this is one of the main problems I have been encountering, the research group that I lead has been encountering in trying to find answers to this question. And then one enormous resource for me to try to tackle this problem has been Vygotsky's work, and especially trying to dig into what could be said that is a Vygotskian approach to agency. Of course, Vygotsky didn't use the word agency. He used the word volition, or volitional action, at least in the translations that are accessible to me in English and French. In Italian, these are the words that he utilizes. But in any case, the essence of his message about human agency is fundamental, is fundamentally informing my work, and I think should fundamentally inform the work on agency in the field of education at large. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And one problem that we encounter, I'm sure, but we not necessarily talk enough about, in my opinion, in our own field, in this big family of cultural, historical, sociocultural, and activity theory work, is that we as a whole represent actually a very marginal and rather contained area of inquiry within the broader field of education and the social sciences. And we need to keep an eye on that so that we can truly influence conceptualizations of agency in the bigger field we are trying to influence. This requires a lot of focus among us, a lot of unity among us. Now, one other thing I've been working on is trying to see how the Vygotsky perspective on agency, what I understand as Vygotsky's perspective on agency, has been put into use in the Change Laboratory formative interventions. This is a method that Nick Hopwood will be giving some clear examples tomorrow. Yesterday, earlier today, it was my yesterday, I guess. I'm completely messed up with the time, but yesterday or something like that, in a previous session, Joe's was presenting the foundations of this intervention method. And this is a method that has been used since the early 90s. It was developed originally in Finland, and now it's used in about 30 different countries. And it is a method that is keeping developing, and for a reason, because now the kind of transformations in schools, organizations, and communities we are facing are seriously different from those in 1990s. So how can this method keep up with that? And this perspective that I've been developing on agency, informed by Vygotsky's work, has also influenced, to a good extent, the Change Laboratory, and keeps influencing it, because as I speak, we are continuing experimenting with the applications of this method. So I will briefly talk about that as well, trusting that you will definitely know more about this in the following session connected to this. So This is part of a bigger research agenda that I am trying to carry out on the pressing challenges of equity and sustainability we are globally facing. So now we are looking at, in particular, the kind of transformations that pertain equity and sustainability. Part of my work is, since 3 years, is actively devoted to poverty. And in particular to homelessness. So how can homelessness be eradicated from Finland? How can we get there? This is one of the issues I am focusing on with the reset. And then, so what is the peculiarity of these challenges of equity and sustainability the world is facing? These are essentially challenges that require organizing. So concerted actions are necessary. Communities are necessary. How do we get there in a world in which individualism is so pervasive, in which we teach increasingly people to compete with one another, to become best in school, no matter what happens to the friend in the next seat. So how do we get there? We have progressively lost the possibility, the skills to organize, the skills to get together and to form concerted actions. This is also very much at the core of agency. And this is what is required to understand agency for equity and sustainability. I don't believe in an individual approach to this, although the individual as a place to play, it is not enough, definitely not. So how can research in this field respond to these challenges? That is one thing I will try to, a proposal that I will try to show you today. There are two papers that I would like to particularly point out. One is already from a few years ago. This is from 2015. And this has been, for me, a very important turning point in my own thinking. This is a publication that was generated after my reading of a piece of Vygotsky, which was not sufficiently connected to double stimulation and to the role that double stimulation may play in agency formation. Therefore, this piece tries to expand on that, to understand double stimulation beyond the mediation, also as a principle of agency. And then, most importantly, in this paper, I provide a visualization of my understanding of the process of agency formation by double stimulation that somehow is strongly presented in this article on self-control by Vygotsky, but I will elaborate on that a little bit later. And this is another publication. This is from the year that just ended, 2020, and it is about this particular approach to agency, which I call TADS, Transformative Agency by Double Stimulation, which is somehow made a little bit more transparent and accessible by means of a metaphor, the metaphor of warping, which I will describe also in connection with the model of TADS today. And this is also a paper in which you will see how the model of TADS has been applied to several empirical cases, including the homelessness case. So let's start from this piece at the beginning. So I said that there was one publication of Vygotsky which has been particularly salient to me. One text of Vygotsky. Probably the text was written originally in 1931, but we discovered it. I discovered it from this collection from 1997. But what I am particularly interested in is the content of this particular piece, which is on self-control. Now, this is the model that I have, the visualization of the process of transformative agency by double stimulation that I have extrapolated, I have taken out from this piece. So this was originally a visualization which was a little bit more complicated than that. For instance, the process as described by Vygotsky, the process of self-control, gaining self-control, described in this piece by Vygotsky, starts with a conflict of stimuli, and then continues with a conflict of motive. And this also is more complex. You can see that in the 2015 paper, this one that I just mentioned, this one. There was, in this you find the more, the visualization which is the closest to the description of Vygotsky, because of course at that point I was really focusing on the contents of whatever I could learn from this text that he left for us. And one other element that in this adaptation of the visualization is simplified is this, because it involves, in the description of the Vygotsky, it involves a neurophysiological aspect that of course is not graspable in the type of data I usually collect in my own research, and therefore I have left an arrow here indicating that the process is more complicated that we see here, but I cannot really do otherwise than consider it one single step. There is also an addition here of an arrow, which is indicated in some other discussions of Vygotsky on double stimulation, but it is not indicated explicitly or as much explicitly as one would like in this text. And it is that this process can actually be recursive in this phase. So this is to tell you where does this visualization come from. Very soon you will know a little bit more about what these arrows entail, okay? The journey of this, of my work, starting from the reading of this piece, the drawing of this visualization, the development, the simplification of this visualization, led also to the testing of this model in two sets of empirical research. Vygotsky refers often several times, to an experiment that was originally not done by him, but by Levin, Kurt Levin, at the time when he was in Germany still. He talks about this as the waiting experiment, or the experiment of the meaningless situation. But as far as I can see, this was not something that he did himself. He learned about this experiment from Levin, and he refers to this experiment as a prototypical example of the formation of volitional action by means of double stimulation, which for me is a very, very serious ground for a novel theory of agency, and especially a novel theory of transformative agency. So I wanted to figure out, what he really tells about the Levine experiment, which Levine did for another purpose. Levine was not studying agency, but Vygotsky interpreted this experiment of Levine in terms of agency. So I was very curious to see, does this really happen? So I followed the description of Vygotsky, and I devised the experiment of the meaningless situation, also called the waiting experiment. And this is one piece that came out also in 2015 on this particular study. This was an experiment done with individuals, but of course, as I said before, I'm particularly interested in collectives. Vygotsky also refers to the experiment by talking about individuals. I wanted to see also how the model works, and if it works, to which extent, by looking at the waiting experiment in which multiple people would be involved. So I replicated the experiment also with the collectives. And this is the outcome of, one outcome of this study is in this publication. So this is an example from the experiment with the individuals. Now, when Vygotsky talks about the, let me get back one moment to the model. When Vygotsky talks about the waiting experiment, he says, a person is put in a room and is has accepted to participate in an experiment. Is brought to the room, and the experimenter leaves and does not return. The person is left in a state of oscillation, uncertainty. What on earth is going on? What am I supposed to do here? There is nothing happening. Hey, wait a minute, the time is passing. I have something to do and I cannot really stay here forever. What can I do? In this situation, says Vygotsky, the person turns to the clock and says, when it is 2 o'clock sharp, I'm out. Now, the tough part, says Vygotsky, in this process of changing the situation, finding the strength to get out of this room, comes when the clock actually strikes 2 o'clock. That's when the conflict of motive, should I stay or should I leave, is going to be reactivated. And that's the moment of truth, namely, shall I really leave or not, as I had decided? This is the most delicate part of the process, because if the persons take actions, then the action is implemented and it actually automatically goes out. This is how Vygotsky explains the waiting experiment. Something similar actually happened in our experiments with the individuals. We were videotaping these people in the room. It's the same thing we did. We invited them, blah, blah, blah. They came in, we disappeared. And the person remained in the room, not knowing what to do. Conflict of motives comes up. Should I stay or should I leave? We were recording that and stopping this after half an hour. And this is what happens in this room with this individual after roughly 12 minutes. When the person came out, we went to her, apologized, revealed that actually this was the experiment. Would you like to come and give us an interview? We have video recorded you and we would like to watch that. Of course, if they said, I am furious at you, there was one person who said that, I hate you, I am furious at you, you made me waste my time, I will not give you permission to use this data. We of course destroyed the data and we didn't use them. It was unfortunate, but we had many, many participants and only one reacted like that. But this one was one of those who sat with us watching again the video and told us what she was thinking. So at that point, 12 minutes 37 37 seconds in the room, this person reported to us that, you see, I had that cup of coffee, so I thought that I will wait until I finish that. So we have here a very similar example as Vygotsky says. When the clock strikes 2, I'm gonna leave. This person says, when I finish this cup of coffee, I'm gonna leave. 12:37, she actually finished the cup of coffee. She's drinking here last drops of coffee. Under this chair, there is a bin, a trash can, in which she threw the coffee cup and left. Notice what happens. She was drinking the last drops of coffee at 12:37:04. She left 12:37:48. In other words, very few seconds passed between ending the coffee and leaving the room. This is completely in line with the description of Vygotsky when he says that this part, if one overcome this part, then this critical part of the real conflict of motive, when the clock strikes 2, when the coffee ends, then the action can happen as if automatically. And this is exactly what happened with this person. So, what we discovered in some descriptions of Vygotsky, but also in our own other experiments, is that this is not that simple. Sometimes a lot of trials, repetitions are needed, especially depending on what kind of action the person is supposed to learn. For instance, imagine that your conflict of motive is between eating chocolate and stopping eating chocolate because you have diabetes. Okay, this is not something you can do overnight, like getting out of the waiting experiment. This is something that you need a lot of reiterations. So a person, one of my favorite experiments is that a person could, and this is a real example, a person decides, okay, I cannot eat chocolate, but I can't resist. So what do? I devise little pieces of chocolate, maximum 3, I am allowed per day. I pack them in a little piece of aluminum at breakfast every morning. And then I put them in my pocket. And every time I am tempted to have a big chunk of chocolate cake or something similar, I pick up my little piece of chocolate, knowing that at the end of the day, I cannot take more than 3. This is my second stimulus, okay? Now the tough part comes when you pass by the room of your colleague and say, hey, it is my birthday, take a piece of cake. And you say, warmest congratulations to you, but I can only take this. This is my little piece of chocolate, my dose for now. I have only 3 I can eat at the end of the day. So one day passes, you are successful with that, but you know that tomorrow is still to come. And you might get again your conflict of motive reactivated when somebody else offers you something, or if you are too stressed out and you pass by a beautiful candy shop and you want to take a bag of chocolate or whatever sweets you would like to eat. Then you have to train yourself. And Vygotsky says clearly that essentially this is a process of self-conditioning, educating yourself for self-control. So this is something that you have to repeat many, many times. And then at some point, it might be you don't need anymore the little pieces of chocolate in your pocket. You have internalized the second stimulus. You don't need to do that anymore in practice. Then it comes up that you again get in the same jam. You start again, perhaps after a stressful period of work, start again going back to sweets. So you have to retrain yourself for another period and get free from this jam in which you are. So that's the idea. Now, let me give you another example of this tough time. This is an example that's come from one of my favorite heroes, that is Muhammad Ali. He said at some point, I don't count my sit-ups. I only start counting when it starts hurting, because they are the only ones that count. In other words, when it's really starting to hurt, when it's the real conflict of motive at stake, meaning that you feel it in your muscles, namely that you feel that, oh God, what I would give for this piece of cake, then it's really the time to start counting, namely to hold on your second stimulus, to remember that you have it as your resource for freedom. So this is... Now, the waiting experiment with the collectives, which is what we really want to understand. This is a situation, this was actually a big... this was a summer school event where we were also, in which the students were also asked if they would participate in an experiment. And here we have 3 participants. The other group was, the main group of students were upstairs in the cafeteria, chatting with one another and with the instructors. And they were serving the experiment here. So they came to the experiment, okay? And they found themselves in the waiting experiment without knowing they were in the waiting experiment, obviously. And then one person say, may I ask a question about the course? And this happened after, especially this person was aggressively suggesting, let's get out of here. We want to go up and enjoy our company with other people, and instead of wasting our time here, I want to have my coffee and go up and enjoy my time in the cafeteria. This guy who said, you know, I am a German, and Germans, they just sit and wait. The other person was quiet for a while till she decided, may I ask a question about the course? And the other people joined in, and they stayed in the room for the time this discussion was over. She needed some clarifications about the course. Already earlier, this person had suggested, let's write a note to the experimenter and say, we are in the cafeteria, but these guys were not very keen to do that. So as soon as the conversation ended on the course that this person had initiated, she came back to the attack and said, shall we write the note? And after many insistences, this guy finally gave in and started writing the note. This person remained quiet, completely silent. And in this picture, you probably can notice that she was very attentively looking at this. The same thing was her. Actually, she was suggesting what to write to him. As soon as the note was completed, they left it on the table. This is the note. It says, you will find us at the restaurant, and they left. Now, I would like you to do the following. These are the actual accounts of what happens in this room. You know that we have video recordings, so I could not give you the whole transcript here, but I made a summary of the contents of their actions in the room and the contents of their talk in the room. And I have each face I have identified with a letter. You have here A, B, C, D, and E. I would like you to find out in little groups to which one of the steps of the TAD model these letters correspond to. Which are these steps? To which step correspond the A? To which step correspond the B, the C, the D, and the E? I just want to warn you that this is not a self-evident mechanical exercise, just for giving you a hint. Okay, this said, we can now go to the waiting, to the breaking rooms. It's not an experiment. That's not the waiting experiment. I'm getting you in here. But I want to make sure that you have, that I have not missed any text on the chat, because for some reason I don't see the chat. Oh, yes. Okay. Now
Yeah.
do see
Annalisa,
yes.
I've just taken a screenshot of your page there, so that when I'm in the breakout room, we can share it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
So other people in their groups someone might do that.
Okay, excellent. Please, it is highly recommended to take a screenshot of this exercise so that you will have it handy for yourself. Okay, so thank you for this, John. I clearly had forgotten to arrange that. So now,
so
okay.
this just quickly, this paper is which paper? Because
This
it will be
the warping paper. This is the warping paper. Yeah.
the warping paper.
You find actually this analysis in the warping paper.
Yeah.
Which is the second one that I had in this. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's in your folder. Yes. So it's labeled LCS1.
Exactly.
Principle of double stimulation. Yes. So it's the second one in the folder for Sannino, which you actually have the folder link, which Andy got me to put into the chat box. So you can go there, get the paper, look at this, and then decide on which part of ABCD it's going on, or read as. Okay, I'll send you off into
Okay,
your.
so yes, wonderful. See you soon. Hello, Sharon. Long time no seeing.
Hi. Oh, hi, Patricia.
There's Patricia also.
Yes.
Hi, Annalisa.
Oh,
hi, Sharon.
hello,
It's great
Patricia.
to be here.
Oh, Patricia is back. Good, great.
Wonderful. So long no see.
Yes, it's
Okay.
been a long time.
Oh, Shaun is in. Hello. Oh, wonderful to see so many people. Jill. Hey, Jill.
Hey,
Oh, wonderful to see you all. It's
Me
like
too.
magic to see people we have not seen so long. Wonderful. Lovely that you could join us. So, how did it go? I share my screen. How did it go? Come on, take the floor. Tell us. Who would like to? Have you picked in the paper? You have seen the solutions there. Well, of course, there could be alternative interpretations, but okay. So perhaps in the interest of time, because I really, really, really would like to have discussion at the end, and I'm hoping that we will have most of the remaining hour for discussion. So I could tell you a little bit my interpretation of this data, and then and the way the model applies to it. And then keep in mind if you have some reservations on my interpretation, because I'm really interested to hear what you see in this data that I might have missed in the way the results is reported in the article. Okay. So the way this has been interpreted is the following. Okay, this is the face of the conflict of motive. Okay, this is a situation in which they start looking around. I can't see very well here. Yeah, sorry. Let me see if I could put it bigger and then everybody can see me included. No, I can't see what the data are. So for a while, I will stay like this. So they are entering the room and they are starting looking around, clearly checking what is this mirror here? What is this set up here? This doesn't look like an experiment room where people have papers and equipment. What is going on here? And then they voice clearly they voiced that should we stay or should we leave? There are references to actual speech here, but also we were looking frame by frame at their movements in the room. So, so they were in search, and they clearly, their actions and also their talk was identifying, was indicating that they were in between two conflicting motives. Shall I stay or shall I leave? Then they find something, they find a resource to hold on that could be called stimulus. I don't like this word at all, but in order to recognize the history of the ideas I have extracted this model from, I am sticking to this terminology, which is definitely problematic because this terminology has also an history. But for us to understand each other, this is meant to be a resource, or as Vygotsky himself says, serving as an auxiliary motive. So this is the moment in which an auxiliary motive is identified. Now, it would be much simpler if this auxiliary motive would be only managed by one person in the room. Being these three people, they have to agree if they go for this auxiliary motive together or not. And here you see that they agree, and they start working on this question that this person had raised. She had a problem with the contents of the course. And this occupied the participants for quite some time. Notice that there is she has voiced this question in speaking turn 46. And in speaking turn 49, this person says, what are we doing here now? We have stopped talking about, we have finished, we have solved the problem on the course question. What are we doing here? So they spent quite some time discussing the course content, filling this room with meaning. By doing that, they had already changed the situation into something which had meaning for them. And they had constructed this meaning with the help of the question by this person. But as soon as the discussion on the course comes to an end, something happens. What does it happen? And a real conflict of motive again emerges. And this is the moment which is the more critical, because there is again a similar situation as this. They are without resources at hand, saying again what to do. But at this point, they don't say, shall we wait or shall we leave? This person says, shall we find something else meaningful? She says these things, I have not invented them. In N294, she says this exactly. Either we find something else meaningful to do, or we leave. So this now, the conflict of motive is this one, between these two motives clashing with one another. And what happens is that she returns back to her original suggestion of picking up a note and writing a note to the experiment. This time, the second stimulus, or a second auxiliary motive, is accepted, at least by this guy. This person doesn't say a word on that, but this guy starts writing, and she doesn't seem to resist. She actually is looking what is he writing. And this person definitely agrees because she was the one who had proposed it all the way from the very beginning. But she is also, if you read the transcript, which is in part reported in the article, you see that she is actually dictating what he should write. So here we have a second auxiliary motive adapted in order to respond to the conflict of motive. And as soon as the note has been completed, 35 seconds passed between the completion of the note and the leaving of the room, which was quite an achievement, I must say, because notice that their bags were here, sitting here, and they are leaving with their bags. So they are really leaving. Their bags are not anymore here. They are quitting. And they had to grab their bags, and they did all this. They also set these two people set the chairs in a nice way. This one was so pissed off that she didn't do that either. But they were, all this happened in 35 seconds. So again, we see that what Vygotsky has said, that as an auxiliary motive, when it is adapted and the implementation can actually happen very, very fast, as if automatically. Now, what does this really mean? For me, this is a very good resource for developing a novel theory of agency, which I call Transformative Agency by Double Stimulation. Why? Because it allows us to actually see how agency is formed, pinpoint steps in this formation, how it may gain consequential momentum, what might obstruct agency, what pedagogical means may be mobilized to support it. These auxiliary motives that the people construct in situations like this are extremely fascinating resources for supporting agency, which are constructed by the learners themselves out of a situation of crisis or a deep uncertainty. And this resonates so much with the priorities we globally have today in terms of finding solutions to equitable ways of living, finding solutions to the climate crisis, and so on and so forth. At least to me, this resonates quite a lot. And then another advantage of looking at this model as a resource for developing a novel theory of agency is that it captures aspects of the formation of concerted actions needed to build equitable and sustainable societies. So this is now a little bit, I have already covered the contents of this paper, the warping paper, but I need to tell you a little bit more what on earth warping means and how it connects to the model of transformative agency by double stimulation. For a long time, because, you know, my main concern, my main work is with people who are struggling. This is really a typical, these are typical settings of my research. This experiment was just a deviation, a momentary deviation, because I was curious to see, does this really happen? Because we didn't have actual reports on that. We just had a description that this had happened sometime, probably in Germany, in the group of Kurt Lewin. But does this really happen? That's why I end up doing these quasi experiments. But in reality, my real interest is to find ways to help people who are struggling, to find solutions in their work, in their schools, in their communities. And I was in search of something, of a metaphor that could connect what I was seeing in the experiment and what I was seeing in the world. And, and the metaphor of warping took a long time to develop. I've been observing the astonishment by Nick Hopwood when I talked about him, about the warping metaphor about 10 years ago. And then finally, it was published in this paper for the first time a few months ago. This tells you how much thinking and how much maturation it required to get to that point. But to give you a sense of what it means, the auxiliary motive or second stimulus is in situations of crisis an anchor. But what kind of anchor? Now, in navigation, there are two types of anchors. And this a specific type of anchor serves a purpose which is called warping the vessel in rough waters. This is a particular kind of anchor because it doesn't stabilize, but it allows movement. So it's not all anchors stabilize, I have learned. Some anchors serve movement. So the way I see the auxiliary motive as an anchor is that it is a warping anchor. It is an anchor serving the purpose of pushing forward a movement, pushing forward a process. Now, it would be inconceivable in turbulent waters to try to stabilize. You need this kind of movement, and you need a resource that helps you to push forward in a storm. This does not mean that there is not movement backward. Of course, in a storm, you go back and forth. While warping, you also go back and forth. But if the attempts at warping are successful, meaning that you find suitable ground underneath the vessel, underneath the water, then you manage to pull the vessel forward. Sometimes, unfortunately, these attempts fail. The anchor does not hit the ground. So what this has to do with what I've been talking about. So give you a little glimpse more about the kind of anchor we are talking about. In navigation, this is called a kedge, which serves the purpose of warping or anchoring forward. So you pull the anchor once it has settled on the ground for moving the vessel away from the problem area. For instance, when the vessel has to be moved against the wind. So step by step, the kedge allows the suitable material grounding for warping the vessel away from trouble. But this requires that the anchor successfully hit the ground, finds a connection in the ground underneath. So for me, this was illuminating because over the past 10 years, I have seen many organizations, many communities finding themselves in situations of storms and the difficult situations of navigating their vessels away from troubles. How to help them was my main concern. How to help them finding the suitable connections with one another in a situation like that to get away from the troubles so that they can stay afloat and not drown. This is particularly important for some very progressive initiatives taken, for instance, in the field of homelessness. I have seen that very vividly. Some of the innovations which are absolutely in favor of these downtrodden people and young people even who are really stigmatized and very much in trouble. Some of these practices are often facing the danger of not being supported. Sometimes because there is not enough financial support, but sometimes also because there is we are lacking this ability of getting together, understanding each other, getting coordinated so that some of these vital activities can survive if they go against the wind. A successful implemented second stimulus may be understood as a warping anchor that hits the ground and allow the vessel to move forward when it finds itself in troubled waters. Now, let's see what happened in the waiting experiment. You have here search actions. They were entering the room and started looking around. What is this? They were searching for material support. They were touching. They were looking through the glass. This was an observation room, and this window is an observation window, actually. They understood that there might be somebody behind it, and they tried to look through this mirror. So all kind of actions revealed us that they were in search of something. So again, some search actions became very, very explicit because they were voiced and they are part of our transcripts. And another search action was the suggestion of writing the note. These are attempts at, this can be considered as attempts at warping. Then there is another attempt at warping, but differently from the others. For instance, this one especially, the writing, the note, this one succeeded. This one hit the ground, while this one didn't, at least not at this point. Then the traction was not anymore holding at that point. The second stimulus did not hold anymore for N2 to remain in the room, and the original conflict of motive was reactivated. They again find the vessel in turbulent waters here. The participants then adapted the note as support, as a kedge, as an anchor, to move the vessel again out of trouble. And this time more radically, because they literally got out of the room. And the two subsequent second stimuli, the question and the written note, created a momentum which literally pulled the participants out of the place. So, wrapping up now, conflict of motives, when people face conflict of motives, they often engage in search actions. Actions of throwing the kedge anchor are made to attempt to find suitable ground underneath the water. Then underneath the vessel. Then when the kedge is hooked to the ground, the crew gains control of the situation and is able to pull the vessel out of harm's way. So this could be considered taking over action when we actually see them implementing the auxiliary motive. The vessel is still in the troubled area, but the crew is able to maneuver it. They are in control of the vessel. So this is when they decide, okay, let's opt for this, let's agree to use this second stimulus. And then when they implement this second stimulus, they finally break out of the troubled area and move away from it. These are pictures from a study we made in a school context in which we saw really a huge array of these second stimuli used for facing this conflict of motive, which in this case was between pupils who were considered underage to do some specific tasks. These were primary school students, pupils who were considered not up to do some tasks which were part of the fifth dimension model that many of you might know. They could select the tasks from their from this maze, and some of these tasks were actually designed by the teachers of the fourth grade. So the teachers were saying, these pupils from the first grade cannot do these tasks. But some of these pupils were saying, yes, I can do this. Why I cannot do the tasks of big boys and big girls? So they were between the motive of wanting to do it because it looked, the software looked exciting, and at the same time hearing the teacher saying, no, you can't do that. It's not for your age. And together with the trainees, these are teacher in training, these girls sitting here, were finding ways to overcome the obstacles by utilizing very material resources, which we could consider anchors, which were of course mediating artifacts, but at the same time, they were also artifacts that set the children free to do what they wanted with this fifth dimension model. So here you see a pre-service teacher lending her hand to extend the pupil's hand for keeping track of counting while dealing with a mathematical task which was beyond his age. The same thing here, a cupboard clock was utilized for doing the exercise in the software. A surface with the letters of the alphabet served a similar purpose. Simplified maps of Italy were devised or drawn, put together or drawn, so that it could be a material support from them to solve the task. At the same time, again, this is a mediating artifact, and it's an agency artifact. Okay, so the series of weighting experiment and other studies we did, such as the one on homelessness that you see in the offered paper discussed, they provide sound empirical basis for the TADS theory. Of course, it is still early days. You don't build a theory out of an effort of 10 or 12 years, but I think that some progress was made. These examples these studies demonstrate how the emergence of transformative agency can be identified and enhanced in quasi-experimental setting, which serve the purpose of isolating, in a way of zooming in a dynamic that otherwise would have been much more complicated to observe in the wild. It was much easier for me to test the model after having done the weighting experiments than it would have been the other way around, I guess. Although it could have been also better, but in any case, cognitively, I found that this could have been a progressive way to move forward. They led to these studies, these weighting experiments in particular, led to a series of studies in several settings, which now are informing, through the model of transformative agency by double stimulation, are informing the change laboratory method. We have now, for the first time 2 years ago, tested an enhanced version of the change laboratory in the field of homelessness, which involved the ground level homelessness practitioners in a youth housing unit, which houses youngsters, 100 youngsters from young people from 18 to 29 years old. They live there, they have their own apartment, but this is a very troubled situation because these people carry with them the consequences of having lived in the streets for years, or experiences of alcohol abuse, drugs, crime, etc., etc. We did this change laboratory in that setting at the ground level with these practitioners, and then the model was enhanced in that the work and the artifacts developed, the model developed at the ground level here was then taken on at the municipal level with a change laboratory at the municipal level, and then with a change laboratory at the national level with multiple organizations and NGOs and 3 ministries that deal with issues of homelessness. So this is something that is very exciting. We are still trying to get a hold of this data. A little bit has come out in publications, but you can see that with the resources that at the moment are available in Finnish universities, it's a slow process. And in any case, it's slow in any case, because this is rather tedious work to do. But now I would like to stop here, so at least I can ensure that we have 35 minutes of discussion. I could see that there are quite a lot of comments which I don't want to miss, so I will save them in case we might end out not having enough time. But I would like to leave the floor to you guys, and please ask comments, criticize, all is welcome, really.
Hello, Annalisa. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, just for the experiment of the 3 groups experiment. Yeah, I just not sure about what type of transformation. I can see there were demonstration of agency when they adopted the stimulus and make decision, implemented them. But I'm not sure what type of transformation they show in the experiment.
Mm-hmm. The transformation, in my view, is the following. When they entered the room, they were entering what everyone considered an experiment. Those who invited them to participate in the experiment knew that this was an experiment. They understood that this was an experiment. But when they entered the room, giving the opportunity for us to start the experiment. But when they leave the room, the experiment is not anymore there. They stop the experiment. They transform the situation.
Oh, okay, I see. They transform the situation. So, yeah, my following question is when we are using double stimulation in our research, yeah, I'm not very sure about when we talk about transformation. So transformation in terms of in terms of the participants' situation. For example, in school, maybe the transformation is only happened in one person, a student, or maybe a group of students understanding. Maybe my previous understanding of transformation has to be like a qualitative change to something bigger. Yeah, big change. Yeah, so that's.
Yeah. Thank you. This is a very inspiring question. Actually, it connects with quite a lot of research done in the field of in the field of agency. There is a lot written about the change in the sense of agency. Probably a very representative block of work on agency is about that. But for this, you don't need the model of transformative agency by double stimulation. You have many other resources in mainstream theories of agency. that are widely used in educational research for that. But if you want to understand agency as a process that at the same time changes the individual or the collective and the world around them, then perhaps one resource that we have can be also the model of transformative agency by double stimulation. In his description of how volitional action is formed by means of double stimulation, Vygotsky says that when these people leave the waiting experiment, they change themselves. They have changed themselves as they have changed their situation. For me, this sentence from Vygotsky is extremely enlightening, because this is what I see in the data. Especially when we are outside the waiting experiment, it is very, very critical, the difference you can observe between before and after. People become owners of their own activities. They realize that, okay, we were in trouble, but we moved forward. We moved away from the troubles. We did it together because we have created instruments together to understand in which mess we were and to find solutions for this. This is at the same time changing themselves and changing the situation in which they are. But there is no middle way. If you don't see anything happening in the world, you might not be actually having in your hands a very good example of transformative agency by double stimulation, which might not mean that you are not facing a process of TADS. It could be that you are, but you have not been patient enough to see what it happened in reality. So it could be, but if you really want to use it as a sound evidence for an argument that, okay, that's really what is happening, then you better have something concrete that is happening.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're quiet today.
Annalisa, I have a comment rather than a question. I thought that was very interesting, but I was aware of some of that from back in October with the reading group. But I just think my first encounter with double stimulation was reading about Vygotsky's experiment with people with Parkinson's disease where they couldn't walk. And the difference between that example where paper was put on the ground, footsteps apart, and that was the mediating object or artifact where the person who didn't think they could walk anymore found they could simply by visualizing how it could be done. So the only similarity between that and yours is they both involve paper, but I suppose the real difference is that with the Parkinson's disease, the researcher was guiding them into what to do, whereas in your example with the waiting room, it was the people, the participants that came up with their own solution, although I think they would have they would have done that eventually, they would have left eventually, but that sped up that process. But I just thought it was interesting about one is completely open-ended and the Parkinson's is very much constructed, but in a sense more transformative because suddenly someone's walking who hasn't walked for many years.
So, well, I'm not sure what to say. Is this, is this a question? Is this a comment? I don't know, but I see some resonance a lot with the work that we have been doing with these young people with history of homelessness, because most of them are drug addicts, and they have very difficult ways of relating. Sometimes they can become very violent. They do not know how to really constructively take actions for their lives, for instance, to move toward rehabilitation. And so the support that is given to them is quite, sometimes it turns into very material resources that are devised by the practitioners in these housing units. The point is, so I can see the parallel between what you are saying, that you have seen with the Parkinson patients, and what we are seeing in this particular context. It is an open-ended, yes, it is. It can take many reiterations. It can take endless reiterations without seeing any results, or without seeing some results. One of the warping, in the second example of a double stimulation warping case I show in this particular paper we are talking about, you see how, for instance, one of these young people took hold of his situation, changed his situation by starting to cleaning his room after many rounds of double stimulation reiterations. And at the same time also, this affected his relationship to drugs, because he realized that when I am under the effect of these substances, I can end up living in a very dirty apartment. If I am not under the effect of this, I can actually live as a human being. Yes, there is a parallel, but how to observe these things, it's very tough in certain contexts, because it might take a lifetime to see this happening, and how you reconstruct the process of agency formation is another methodological challenge. But then about the mediation, for me, the classic example of the Parkinson patient is without any doubt an example of mediation. And without any doubt, what I'm talking about are examples of mediation. However, there are also examples of transformative agency by double stimulation, in which the auxiliary motive is deliberately taken up by the actor in response to paralyzing conflict of motives. And this is something novel that has not been sufficiently emphasized in the specialized literature on double stimulation before. And I think it is very important to emphasize that in some circumstances, when mediating artifacts become auxiliary motives in response to conflict of motives, they can serve the purpose of forming volitional action / agency, and a transformative kind of agency.
I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for your amazing talk. It's really exciting. Two things. First is, how does the principle of double stimulation relate to Engerström's double bind, his original theory? And the second question is, in the fourth generation of cultural historical activity theory in your recent paper, where you say that the unit of study has to be taken to mutually interdependent evolving activity systems sharing a common object, does it have to be sharing common object, or can they be sharing, for example, tools or other aspects of the activity system?
Okay, can you just say a little bit more about the second question? Because I was thinking about the answer to the first question, and then I got I could understand only half of your second question. So please, can you reiterate again?
Sure. So your recent paper with Engerström, you talk about the fourth generation of activity theory, cultural historical activity theory, and that the unit of analysis has to be multiple activity systems interacting and evolving interdependently over time. In the third generation, one of the requirements was they had to have a shared or potentially shared object. Does that still have to be, does it have to be a shared object, or could it be, say, a shared instrument or shared community?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. You're actually asking me 3 questions, in fact. Okay. The first one, what is the connection between double stimulation and double bind? Okay. Now, the double bind is a situation that you can observe in certain processes of transformation, when people say, after seeing a number of evidence that we collect in our ethnographic field work, for instance, in change laboratories, of things going really wrong in their organization or in their school, some people might say, well, this is enough now. We cannot accept this to happen anymore. We must take action together. So this is a situation of double bind. Mm-hmm. But this is also a situation that is not at all divorced from the process of transformative agency by double stimulation. But so we could talk about that at length, but this is for responding to your question now. I would like to say that the process of double stimulation, transformative agency by double stimulation, emphasize the conflict of motives, the situation of paralysis. And this is probably the most challenging for an interventionist. This is the most challenging part. Why? Because this is a situation, the conflict of motive is a situation of paralysis. I am echoing my understanding of the text on self-control by Vygotsky that I mentioned before. This is a situation of paralysis. So when you have, in a transformative process, when you have the double bind, you are already going fantastic. You love it. You say, yes, I am all with you. Let's go on and start designing a new activity. Mm-hmm. But when you have a paralysis, you need to find a way to get them out of the paralysis. And this is unfortunately the most common situation, because we have, as interventionists, not yet available, I would say, the necessary assessment tools to assess the maturity of the contradictions, to assess the maturity of expansive learning processes. And therefore, we might engage ourselves in situations in which people are not quite ready yet for transforming anything. Mm-hmm. And then you cannot really show what you would like to show, or support what you would like to support. But still, there is quite a lot you can support and you can show. That's the good thing. But now, what is so your first question lead to the difference between what is a double bind, how is a double bind different from a conflict of motive? As I said, the double bind is people not accepting the situation, they are finding it intolerable, and therefore they feel that it is now time for me to take action. But the conflict of motive is a situation of paralysis. They are stuck between two opposite motives, and they need to find a way out. So okay, double stimulation hopefully can help that. The second question, your reading of our suggestion about the fourth generation challenges we are facing in the kind of work we are trying to do, mainly supporting change laboratory processes and expansive learning processes and agency processes across hierarchies. The kind of challenges that the fourth generation activity theory wants to meet are challenges of such demands that they require enhanced tools. So we feel that just piling up endless amounts of triangles would not help us a bit, because we need to make sure that these triangles are primarily anchors for designing new solutions. The idea is that to help them design new solutions. So we felt that a possible new unit of analysis to consider, and this is by no means determined, it's a proposal that I hope it's read as a proposal, because we are still working on it, is that we should look at multiple expansive learning cycles intersecting with one another. This does not mean that the intersecting activity systems are dropped and the third generation unit of analysis we have been used becomes obsolete. Not at all. It can be still used for zooming into particularly difficult dynamics and relations between activities when you look at these multiple layers of transformations you want to affect. But for us, it seems to be much more viable to use a unit of analysis which speaks to us, but also speaks to the participants in our interventions, because for us, these units of analysis are not only units of analysis for research, they are units of analysis at the same time for interventions, for participatory analysis that we do with people. So we would lack focus if we would have an endless number of activity systems. But now, this was my understanding of your second question. Then your third question was, can these multiple activity systems encountering one another, intersecting one another, meeting one another, have instead of a shared object, have a shared instrument? If you want to, you can't do without the object. That's it. If you take from an activity system away the object, the whole system collapses, because the object is the driving motive of the activity. So if you want two activities to intersect with one another functionally and consequentially, you need to have a focus on what is happening at the level of the object between them. It could be that when you are looking at it, they are not even sharing that yet. Most of the time is good to be in this situation, because then your research could do something about making this object shared. But the tools, if they are not shared, if they are not functionally operating, then they can become obstructive to pursue a shared object. So are the communities. If the communities might not be aligned, so you need to see all the elements of the system as they come together. And what of the elements of what the relations between elements in the system are the most problematic for the main idea of pursuing a shared object, to getting to the point of having a shared object. Remember that when you deal with triangles, you are dealing with two things: relations between multiple elements that form the triangle, that affect one another and affect the outcome, and then you are dealing with the process, meaning that's why they are arrows. They are arrows. Differently from many representations in publications, these triangles are made out of arrows, which indicate movement. That means that when you have a triangle, you have a picture of, at some point in time, can be now, can be in the past, can be in a foreseen future, you have this picture that is an activity system froze in time. So then if you look at the activity system in these terms, that you cannot do without the object might be not shared yet. You might get there if you understand that there are some relations in the process of the transformation of this activity from the past to now that have become particularly problematic, and you need to zoom into this particular relation, work with the participants how to solve it, and see if this affect the way they are sharing the object or not, and the outcome. Hope this helps.
Very much so. Thank you very, very much.
Hi, Annalisa.
Hello, Patricia.
It's great to see you. Thank you so very much for, the way you explain things, that it's so wonderful. This was really, really helpful.
I am a teacher. I want to be a teacher.
We all are. Yes. So thank you very much. That was so clear and helpful. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about a turning point, just like Darcy was thinking about the double bind connection. I'm thinking about turning point because I have a publication that, and I don't seem to agree with the reviewers in what makes a turning point be it. So I was wondering, and you mentioned it at the beginning of your talk, that word, but then you didn't elaborate. So what makes it a turning point? Is it creating the second stimulus that makes the turning point? Is it that everyone accepts the implementation of that stimulus? Or is it any volitional action? Is it more general, any volitional action that shifts the direction or the object of the activity? Oh, and do you need evidence for that in order to call it a turning point? So is it more general or more specific?
A turning point that matters in the process of transformative agency by double stimulation is with the collectives, is when the auxiliary motive is adopted by at least some of the people in the room, because, or in your context. This is a turning point, because that's when you can see agency materializing under your eyes. You need to have evidence of that. You need to have evidence that there is this shift, and that this uptake of this artifact or whatever resource they are using, it's actually having some consequences. So if you are looking at the turning point from the point of view of the formation of agency, I would say that that would be the most salient. Of course, there are also other turning points. The turning point is not negligible, the turning point between the state of paralysis and the decision that I am going to do this at some point. But it's still very meager compared to really engaging in the real conflict situation. When the clock strikes 2, then you can see what happens. And that's the very beauty of the inspiration of Vygotsky on double stimulation for agency, because you can finally see agency formation in the process of its genesis, in the process of its becoming. And this is, mainstream theories of agency from sociology and psychology can claim what they want, but I have not yet seen the process of agency formation. They claim that they see it. I don't see steps. I don't see how I can turn these steps into pedagogical resources. So there is a problem for me with the mainstream understanding of how agency is formed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Very interesting. Okay, come on, there are 7 more minutes. This is fascinating.
Can I, since nobody else is going to leap in, I've been, before we started the session, you were talking about your doctoral students at the University of Helsinki, hundreds of them, well, over 100, and the kind of isolation that they have and the way that they're not completing or dropping out. And I speak from a bias here because I have in my past life been a president of a postgrad student association. And part of our mandate was, in fact, dealing with issues like that. And so I'm wondering what would be the appropriate kedge in that situation to overcome that kind of double bind of isolation, of not being able to complete because you can't engage with what you're doing, and you know.
Yes.
And I suppose there's a more general question there, is when we're thinking about what kedges to bring into situations where there is that paralysis, how we find the right kedge.
Yes. Yeah. My way of doing this, a very, very interesting question. Of course, I have not really studied this, but my way of dealing with this situation, which actually, to give you a little bit better background, since I have moved to Tampere 3 years ago, and I had the perception I was moving to a different city in Finland, I realized that I had to realize that I was facing actually a new planet, because in Helsinki, we had many doctoral students interested in activity theory, sociocultural theory, Vygotsky, etc. This is unfortunately not the case in the university in which I am now working. So I am directing a program of doctoral education in which there are 135 active students who cannot really give a dime about the work that we all care for in this place, except probably 3 or 4 that I am supervising myself. So this, I think it's important to say that we guys need to really get organized among ourselves and get stronger by organizing among ourselves, because the world out there in the social sciences is dreadful at the moment. Seeing how meaningless some of these theses produced are in terms of the emergencies we are facing in the world is heartbreaking for me. And I think it's not a very good service we do to these students and to science. But I am working on it, believe me. How I am working on it? In a similar way as we try to do in our studies, in our intervention studies. We talk with the people. I have a very open relationship with all our doctoral students, even the majority who are not supervised by me directly. That already is quite a hassle, because they are fearful of the head of the program. And having somebody who mingle with your studies, your things, is threatening at the beginning. And then I try to figure out what is the problem. And I have realized that most of this is that they are not part of the culture of the faculty. Most of our doctoral students are unfortunately not funded. They have to find funding by themselves. And this means that they are often away from the main activities of the faculty. They are very poorly integrated in the research activities of our faculty. So what I am doing is to offer cages in our program that can bring them together. One thing, I have devised a course which is mandatory for first-year students, but also open to all students coming from the previous years, in which there is an introduction to all the research group work we do in our faculty. In our faculty, we have 12 different research groups. So each group puts videos of their research. The students watch these videos, read their papers, and then they come to discuss with the research group members. This gives them the opportunity to A, get to know one another, and B, to discuss with researchers, and this gives them the opportunity to get integrated more in the community. So these are the kind of things, that the kind of kedges I'm throwing in this situation. Of course, the big deal is whether they catch this, because you can have all this auxiliary motives and artifacts that you want, the perfect ones, but unless they are adapted, unless they are taken on by the learners and not put in use, they will have very little effect.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is the following. I am gonna save this chat and read what you wrote. And if we have not covered some of the things that you have written in the chat, please alert me, because I might not have your email addresses in the chat, and we can continue this conversation together.
In fact, you do have our email, because I've sent out a complete list of the participants, and it also includes all the presenters. Okay. So everybody has everybody else's email, and I've done that on the basis that I expect. Well, this is kind of getting very dictatorial, isn't it? I expect our doctoral career students to be agential, to actually contact, rather than having to wait for a one-to-one consultation. They put their name down to actually start contacting presenters and each other to work together. So all of you have all of the information. Use it wisely.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed it. And I was so pleased to see colleagues that I have not met for many years now. Thank you so much for everything you're doing, and let's stick together.
Absolutely, yes, and thank you, Annalisa, for it's just wonderful to have you, and a real inspiration, and has really finished our day on a high note. And now we can start referring to, say, the list of participants and their emails as a kedge, because it'll be used by students to draw each other together. I'm going to use the word kedge everywhere. It's going to be one of those drinking. We've had a number of terms which have been put forward, lens being the first of them, which are getting overused, and we have to take a shot. Kedge will be the next one, I'm afraid. So they won't have the final session that I put on the program today. We'll drop that, but we will meet tomorrow at 10 o'clock, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, half an hour before the start of Nick Hopwood's session, which is the culmination of these set of 3 cultural historical activity theory sessions. So that will be really exciting tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing you then.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Annalisa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.